My favorite children's book told indigenously.
Wait, can you stand back up again? Wait, is that like is
This
that like
is from
Columbus?
Yeah, yep. It's Where the Wild Things Are, but the kid is talking about Columbus's ships and terrifying the monsters.
And then the colonizers came, and the
then
nightmare began.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
Wait, who made that shirt?
I think it's Natives, N8, TIDES.
Oh, yeah. I know who that is.
Yeah.
Or I don't know who that is, but I know of that. Is that 8th generation? No.
No, I think it's just Natives.
Okay.
But yeah, super cool. I was so excited about this shirt, and your earrings are absolutely.
I know.
Fabulous.
So this is to entice people to watch the YouTube recording of this episode. We don't have advertisements on Red Power Hour, but Elena and I are both wearing some native artist bling. I'm wearing some rowdy, massive earrings, landback earrings. Thank goodness they're made out of resin, so they're very lightweight. But I got these bad boys for like $25, which is a steal, at Birchbark Books, which is Louis Erdrich's bookstore here in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis. And so I was like, what should I wear for RPH today? And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to rock these earrings.
Absolutely fabulous. And I want to give a shout out to like the urban native era. I have one of their baseball caps, which I'm not wearing right now because I don't wear baseball caps when we're recording indoors. But Willie Jack was wearing it on Res Dogs, and she has several colors, which makes me jealous. I feel like I need to get some more colors of that baseball cap.
Willie Jack is my favorite. I know this.
Mine
Okay,
too.
this episode is not about reservation dogs, but full disclosure, Elena and I talked. Most of our prep today for this episode was talking about season 2 of Reservation Dogs, which dropped last week. There's 2 episodes in for the second season, but we're not going to record an RPH episode on that until the entire season is done. So you're going to have to wait for like a month and a half or so for that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and Willie Jack is so my favorite character that I named one of my cats after her. We got a little kitten from the Espanola Animal Shelter, and we named her Willie Jack. And yes, just love Willie Jack.
Okay, I'm copying that because I'm getting a kitten for my new home in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis. So been trying to think about the name. Willie Jack is pretty perfect.
Willie Jack will have a cousin in the Twin Cities then. There'll be one in Ogopoge and one in that would be great. Yeah.
Guaranteed.
It's a great name for a cat.
That is a great name for a cat. Willie Jack. Yeah, so welcome back to Red Power Hour, everyone. I have my comrade this is Melanie, first of all. This is Melanie Yazzie, co-host of Red Power Hour. I am tuning in today from Minneapolis, otherwise known as like Minneapolis, St. Paul area. My comrade Justine told me that every time I hop on a meeting for like Red Media or Red Nation, it's usually like 3 to 4 weeks in between the meetings I'm on. She's like, every time you come on a meeting, you're like, yeah, I just drove 1,000 miles to go do this thing. And now I'm in a completely different place. The same is true. I don't remember when we recorded, like a month ago, maybe? Our last RPH episode, but I have indeed driven about 2,500 miles since we last recorded RPH. But I'm happy to report that I'm not doing that any longer for the foreseeable future. Finally relocated and ready to start teaching, actually, in a few weeks at the University of Minnesota in my new job. So
Woohoo.
I don't have a table yet, so I'm sitting on the floor to record this episode. But you know what? This is what I do for the people. I'm here. I'm always down for Red Media and the Red Nation. But you want to introduce yourself, awesome. Elena?
Yep. This is Elena Ortiz. I'm calling in from Ogopoge, otherwise known as Occupied Santa Fe, aka Mordor, and it's becoming more Mordor-like the closer we get to Indian Market. Town is impossible right now. Swarming people wearing giant pieces of silver and turquoise and cowboy boots that cost as much as my car. Not a good time to be in Mordor right now, but
Oh, I forgot that. Yeah, that's happening. But we didn't organize anything this year, but maybe we can next year. But happy Pueblo Liberation Day. Is that what it's called? August 10th, right? It's coming up?
yep, yep, yep. Pueblo Liberation, Pueblo Revolt Day is
Pueblo Revolt
coming
Day.
up, and it's been raining. For those of you who have followed us for the last couple of years, it's been really tough in the Pueblos because we have not done a lot of dancing. Ceremonies that have taken place behind closed doors, so we collectively, a lot of the Pueblos really started dancing outdoors again, starting I think with Isleta or no Laguna in March, and we've all been dancing. Taos Pueblo is now open again, and so we've been dancing our little hearts out, and it's been pouring, like literally rainstorms every day, and just it went from very hot, very sad, very brown and dry to like everything is green and beautiful and it's cooler, and it's been wonderful. So
Oh, that's so good to hear. Yeah, when I was down there in Albuquerque about 10 days ago, it was hot. It was just like bone crushingly hot. You just go outside and it just punches you in the face kind of hot. I was like, dang. So
yeah.
I'm really glad to hear that. Well, cool. What are we talking about today? Okay, first, before we talk about the thing we're going to talk about, I just want to let folks know that our next RPH episode, which we're going to record in 2 weeks, will be about the movie that just dropped today on Hulu called Prey. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but this is the new Predator movie, but it's like very indigenous. A lot of it is in the Comanche language. I guess they had a premiere, like a Comanche premiere somewhere in Oklahoma last night or like last week or something, or over the weekend. And the protagonist is an indigenous young woman who apparently is Dinean Lakota. And so Elena and I are both going to watch that tonight in the comfort of our homes. And then we're going to invite some comrades on to do kind of a breakdown of the whole movie for our next Red Power Hour episode. So if you're interested, I know, I'm so excited. If you're interested in hearing that, like that episode will drop in a couple of weeks. But today we're going to talk about something not as fun. I mean, we're going to talk about the apology. Yet another apology to Indigenous people by the Pope. That happened like last week, right? And
I think it was 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago? I was like, oh, this is happening.
Time goes by.
And everyone was like, this is a big deal. And I was like, this is some bullshit. I just didn't.
This is some bullshit.
But we figured we needed to do a somewhat freewheeling, semi-uninformed episode about it. I don't know.
A lot of opinions.
I mean, I've been like moving and, on the road and stuff like that. So I don't have time to watch like an hour and 45-minute video of the Pope, like apologizing and then all of the weird pageantry. But I watched about an hour of it in between. And what I saw was, I don't know, just kind of like embarrassing. Is the right word? There's a lot of men. There's a lot of men like prancing around in feathers. I don't know, preening in front of the Pope, which... like who wants to see that?
Like a bunch of peacocks.
Like a bunch of peacocks. Yeah, a bunch of native man peacocks.
Mm-hmm. And then for those of you who are not living in a hole, you probably saw that one of the Cree elders gifted the Pope a headdress with eagle feathers, and that caused quite a kerfuffle amongst Native peoples. I don't pay attention to like white mainstream press, but among Native peoples, Indian Country Today, and some of the other news news outlets talked about it. And so there's a lot of really intense feelings around that. And Melanie and I were talking about this earlier. Like, I come from a culture that doesn't do a lot of headdresses and wearing of eagle feathers, and that's just like the pueblos in general, except during ceremonies or dances. So, from my perspective, the gifting of something like that to a non-native um, is not appropriate, and that's, that to me stuck out. There are a lot of people who have stronger feelings. If you just want to go the legal route, like, no one except native people are actually legally entitled to possess eagle feathers. So that was kind of fucked up. Um,
Yeah, like what else
and,
you gonna say about it? That was fucked up.
that was pretty fucked up. And I think that, like, Melanie hit on that, like the pageantry and the prancing, um, because the Pope is some, big deal among um, some of these communities that he was visiting to make this apology. Some of these communities, like my own, have always been hardcore Catholic, and it was a big deal. I have strong feelings about that personally. And again, if you've listened to Red Power Hour, um, you probably know I despise the Catholic Church. And like, it has done more damage to my people and my community than anything else. It established, a heteropatriarchy where there was not one. It created, they created schools, and um, we know what happened in many of those schools. I got a lot of this distaste for the Catholic Church from my father, who used to say that, he grew up so poor. The priests would come out and round up all the kids to go to church, because the church was right there in the center of the pueblo. And half the time they didn't have money to pay for shoes. And so the kids would all go into church barefoot. And then they would pass around the offering tray. And if they didn't have something to give them, they would whip the bottom of their feet. So here are these kids that are so poor, their families are so poor, they can't buy shoes. But if they don't have money to give the church, they will have their feet whipped. And so my personal experience with the Catholic Church is is wrought in these stories of what they did to our people from the very beginning of colonization, and continues to this day with the boarding schools and the pedophile priests who, not too long ago, we're talking 20, 30 years ago, they were sent to New Mexico. They were sent to Jemez, near the Pueblo. The pedophile priests were sent there to rest before they got relocated to a new location where they could abuse more children. So we have a really fraught history with the Catholic Church, and the Pueblo Revolt, which our celebration of that will be coming up in a few days, was fought to rid ourselves of the church. And so I see indigenous people accepting apologies, empty apologies from the Pope and the Vatican. And my first reaction is, you're every single indigenous person there, and who agrees with what they did, is dishonoring their ancestors, who died to preserve our culture and to pass on our culture to our children and to keep our communities alive. Our ancestors died fighting the Catholic Church. and you think it's okay to gift him with an eagle headdress? To me, I find that despicable, and I find the apology hollow. Until they're willing to offer like major billions of dollars in reparations and land back, because let's not, let's get right to the bottom of it. The Catholic Church is the wealthiest organization in the world. They are the largest landowner in the world. So if you all want to still, worship Daddio, JC, and the Spook, that's your business. But like the fucking church needs to start giving some shit back, like major shit back, because that's bottom line.
Did you just say Daddio, JC, and the Spook?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. Apparently that needs to be the title for. I don't know if that's offensive. That I don't know. I'm not Christian. I wasn't raised Christian. I don't know if that's blasphemous or whatever. But that was fucking hilarious. First of all, that you just said that. But also, hell yes, I agree with everything you just said. I was listening to what was his name? The person, Chief Wilton Littlechild, was the first person who got up and spoke. He did like the invocation of the welcoming for the Pope's visit, and he was also the individual who put the headdress on the Pope. But he was talking about like how the Pope's visit to Canada came to be, right? And it was this delegation. I remember this, a delegation of Indigenous people, First Nations people, boarding schools or residential school survivors, children. It was like an intergenerational delegation went to the Vatican. When was that? Last year? I don't remember when that was. But they essentially invited the Pope to come to Indigenous land in Canada, to engage in a process of, what was it? It was truth, justice, reconciliation, and healing. Those words kept being used constantly by the men, the Indigenous men and the Pope man, who were talking. And so right after he spoke, there was a healing dance. The drum circle, the drum group was playing, and then there was a dance. Indigenous folks were dancing a healing dance. And this individual, Chief Littlechild, first of all, is a dignitary, very involved in the United Nations work, clearly like a very well-known figure in Canadian Indigenous kind of politics. But he has served or did serve for a long time as a commissioner on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And of course, I hope people know what the TRC, like is the acronym for that is. We've been very critical of it on Red Power Hour. Like, a lot of Indigenous people have been very critical about the truth and reconciliation industry in Canada, but it's not a coincidence that this man, right, that this Indigenous man who has a lot of political power is heading up or represents like the truth and reconciliation machinery of Canada, which of course, like as people like Glenn Coulthard and Leanne Simpson and many others have pointed out, is like a politics of recognition that doesn't always materialize in real kind of like material reparations, like land back, right? Or like what you were saying, Elena, Catholic Church being like the wealthiest entity in the world, actually has a lot of resources that it could put towards reparations for all the violence, that the genocide, for genocide. But what I'm saying is that it's the reason, like the pageantry behind this, the gestures towards healing, this notion that somehow like we have to invite the Pope and we have to welcome the Pope, make him feel really at home. We have to treat him like a dignitary, Big Daddy Pope, and genuflect and parade in front of him. That I feel like we've seen this before throughout the last 15 years of like the Truth and Reconciliation era in Canada. With mostly men. It's mostly like Native men in leadership positions, probably band council versus like grassroots kind of traditional leadership, really like genuflecting to Big Daddy power, whether it's like the nation state, the government, Trudeau, the prime ministers of Canada, or figures like the Pope. And I said this during the last episode that I recorded for RPH a month ago, but God, just like 2 years ago, because of the land struggle the Wet'suwet'en land struggle and the hereditary chiefs and the women who are on the front lines of that struggle, they declared like 2 years ago that reconciliation is dead in Canada. And it's like, weren't you guys listening to them? Like, don't these like, don't these like, parading Native men listen to the women who actually have real authority and are on the front lines, like actually protecting the land? Like, why are you prolonging the lie, the lie of reconciliation when it's been so thoroughly critiqued? And I think it's been so brilliantly critiqued. And actually, it's been counteracted by so much of what's happened on the ground in like frontline struggle that's primarily being led by women and like Two-Spirit and youth from your nations and from your communities. And here, like, this big news story is splashing across the world. It's on BBC, it's on CNN, right? Like, everyone's like watching the Pope apologize and watching these Native men like prance around in feathers and fringe for the Pope. And it's just like, read the room, you know? Like, I don't really think this, it seems like incredibly out of step with where like Native people are at. And especially right now in the United States, where we're coming to terms, finally, there's like some actual honest public discourse about the egregious genocidal violations of the boarding school system here in the US. Thank goodness Deb Haaland actually issued a report or whatever. But that actually only happened because of the activism primarily of Native women as well over the last 20 to 30 years to bring that issue to light and to have someone actually do something about it. But I don't know, the Pope's apology and all of the pomp and circumstance around it, it just felt like, just felt like the state congratulating itself and patting itself on the back. It just seemed like a heteropatriarchal shit show.
Like, seriously, they don't show, you were talking about Wet'suwet'en, like they don't show the women being violently arrested by the RCMP, because that doesn't make good press. But this made great press, and it was broadcast all around the world. And to my mortification, that here are these men, basically representing the pain and trauma and genocide of the Catholic Church, and they're accepting an apology and gifting him an eagle feather headdress, which is going to sit in the Vatican vault along with every other indigenous piece of religious iconography or regalia or religious artifacts that are sitting in the Vatican vaults right now. That's going to go right into the Vatican vault along with everything else. And it just makes me sick. It makes me really sad. Because so for the first time, the Pope did say genocide. He did acknowledge the church's cultural genocide. And like genocide is genocide, it's a standalone word. You don't get to attach another word to it. It's genocide. And he acknowledged the genocide, but where are the reparations? Where is the land back? Where is the opening of the vaults and the returning of all of these things to Native nations and indigenous peoples all over the world? Things that were stolen, that were raped, that were pillaged. Where are the billions of dollars in reparations for the survivors of the boarding schools, but also for the survivors of the survivors of the boarding schools, an ongoing intergenerational trauma that has been caused? And people brought up too on social media, repeal the doctrine of discovery. And like I used to believe that repealing the doctrine of discovery was an important step. That was a long time ago, and now I'm just like, fuck the Catholic Church. But I do think that it's important for Indigenous people to know that the doctrine of, so all y'all, if there's any of you who are still under some delusion that the United States of America was founded on the principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the separation of church and state, I got news for you. The Doctrine of Discovery was a papal bull that was issued that basically gave European nations, Christian nations, the right to plunder, pillage, rape, and lay claim to all land that was occupied by non-Christian people. Read the rest of the world. And it was used as a basis for law in the United States. So a papal bull issued by a pope in the 1400s, 1493, is actually the basis of law in the United States of America. So that kind of violates this whole idea of church and state, and has been used to steal all of Turtle Island from Native people. So yeah, repeal it. That would be nice. And then give us like all the land back. Like from sea to shining sea. And while you're at it, give all of the land the Catholic Church now owns back to the original indigenous inhabitants of that area.
Like not just here, like everywhere.
That would be good. Yeah. Everywhere.
Yeah. I think like I've been very inspired by the folks who have talked about and done work on the repeal of the Doctrine of Discovery, and that is a noble effort. But I think that like the circumstances, like the historical circumstances, has maybe shifted, and we're now in the land back era, right? We're now in an era where we're talking about decolonization and reparations in like a very tangible way. I would say, even though that's not necessarily happening, that is what we're talking about, and that is the demand that's unifying Indigenous struggle in Turtle Island. That's what's on the table. And so I think like the empty symbolic gestures of reconciliation that have been a part of kind of the liberal recognition industry for the last 15 years, this is why I was saying like read the room, like that shifted already. And so something like this happening in 2022 after so many Native people have died from COVID, and like, you know, like we were talking about the Supreme Court decisions in the US, the June 2022 Supreme Court decisions, the RCMP raiding constantly Unistoten camp and Wet'suwet'en, like things shifted already. Like Indigenous struggle and Indigenous kind of grassroots expectations have shifted. And so this kind of thing doesn't really land the same way I think it did maybe a decade ago, even like pre-Standing Rock kind of moments. And so I think moving forward, right, what you can't change what the Catholic Church did. I don't know. I didn't listen to all. Sorry, we had to start recording, and I had to set up my little makeshift studio here on the floor in my new house, and like hydrate before we recorded today. I couldn't finish the Pope's actual speech. I was about, I think, maybe halfway into it, but I wonder if he like used the word rape to describe what the Catholic Church was doing, like 20 years ago to Native children in Catholic-run boarding schools. You know, the fact that the relocating of pedophile priests from parishes, let's say on the East Coast, like in Boston, which is infamous for them, relocating them to parishes close to Native communities in places like New Mexico. It's not like those priests were in recovery. They were like actively preying on Native children at that time too. And that's like a practice that still happens today, is my understanding. So I don't know how you apologize for like something that still is happening, right? Which has like been a very common critique of people who are like, well, colonialism and genocide isn't something that happened in the past, right? Colonialism and genocide are like a structure like that continues to inform and shape our present moment and our present tense, like as Indigenous people. And so how are you going to apologize for something that is ongoing, right? And so if we understand the Catholic Church to be, I don't know, probably one of the most powerfully predatory purveyors of colonial violence and genocide historically and in the present, and if we don't like stop them from continuing to act as such, then they're going to continue to do that in the future, then that might help us to reframe like, what should we actually do about the Catholic Church when it comes to its predatory relationship? Like it's definitively predatory relationship with indigenous nations, particularly with women and children, particularly, and probably also LGBTQ2 folks. And so I think that the question of land back, or like the demand for give land back that you took, throw resources at, not throw resources, but just like put resources towards indigenous people. Don't build programs for us. Just give us the money and we'll figure out what to do for better or worse with those resources. But those are important things, I think, that can be a real gesture of some type of reparation. But I think there also needs to be like a real stance. Like there needs to be a stance against the Catholic Church, and like several honest conversations and like policies about the fact that they continue to prey on our people. And unless we're willing to engage in like self-protection and self-defense against the Catholic Church in that way, in addition to demanding land back, in addition to demanding like reparations, I don't really know if they're going to stop doing what they do. I don't know if like the incidents, or the, what do you call it? Like the frequency of, acts of pedophilia has decreased in the Catholic Church, simply because of like the amount of public attention and pressure that's been placed on the church. You get what I'm saying? Like the Catholic Church owns the world and it has like 1 billion, people who are Catholic. What do you call those? Converts? No, parishioners. See, I don't know anything about Christianity. I'm so sorry. There are 1 billion people who belong to the Catholic Church in the world, right? That is a powerful institution. That doesn't really have to do anything except apologize for stuff, right? And so how do you force an institution that powerful, that continues to prey on you and your people, how do you stop them from doing that in the future? That should be a serious question in anyone's mind, don't you think?
It should be, and it should start, where anything that is going to be successful starts with the people, and with realizing, like in my community, and in many Pueblo communities, the Catholic Church was imposed upon our ancestors the same way a patriarchal system of government was imposed, and the two went hand in hand. And it's been like that since the 1500s. The men who benefit the most from having these heteropatriarchal institutions in power are the ones that are the least likely to speak out against them. And I have heard everything from men about how our ancestors made a covenant with the Catholic Church. Like, what the fuck is a covenant? It's like something in the Indiana Jones movies, that shit puts in and it kills Nazis. So what is this covenant? Where did it come from? What does it mean? If it is a thing, it's caused more harm than good. So how do we let it go? How do we make a stand? The church is not allowed any longer to act in our communities. If you want to believe, and if you want to believe in God, if you want to believe in the whole Trinity, Daddio, JC, and the Spook, that's your business. But the church is an entity. The church is not faith. The church is not God. The church is a business. It is a corporation that, just like a corporation that creates deadly chemicals and puts them in our water and kills us and makes us have genetic abnormalities, and we pass those down to our children and grandchildren, and people die of cancer. That's what the church is. And how would we stop that if it was a tangible harm, like a chemical spill or something like that, because that's exactly what it is. How would we stop it? Well, we'd hold them responsible. We would sue them. They would have to give us lots and lots of money, and they would have to give all of the families who had been harmed by this toxicity lots and lots of money. And that's how we need to treat the Catholic Church. Like, if you want to believe in God and all of that, that's your business. That's your faith. It's a personal thing. But the church is a business. It is an entity that is used for mechanisms of control. So that has to be addressed in our communities, and it has to be addressed first and foremost by the people. But we need to hold our leaders accountable, because they're the ones who are benefiting from this corporation that is in our communities. And we need to toss them out. And I think I read from Comrade Nick that there was in Lakota territory. I just glanced at it. I didn't read it completely thoroughly. It was in Pine Ridge, that there was a pamphlet that was being circulated that was, I don't remember what it was entitled, but it was questioning like Leonard Peltier and other Lakota religious leaders. And that community tossed the church the fuck out of there. Like, get lost.
Yeah, I was actually going to refer to that. I believe the Oglala Lakota Tribal Council passed some sort of vote last week. I think it was last week, ejecting like predatory missionary work off of the reservation. And I was like, hell yes. Like, please, if like other indigenous nations could follow suit to do that. So there's that, right? We can actually leverage tribal sovereignty. Again, tribal sovereignty is only as good as what we do with it. And use that as a form of self-defense and protection of our people against the predations of not just the Catholic Church, but like a lot of the different Christian sects that just have like preyed so much on our people over the centuries, over the centuries to collect and hoard our souls. And then we can sue the Catholic Church, right, and utilize those resources and the money to build up things that are like life-sustaining and reinforce language and culture for our people. But it would also seem that just really like dismantling heteropatriarchy in our tribal government structures, but then also kind of like in our social relations with one another seems pretty instrumental, I think, to kind of like breaking the control that the church has over, like everything in our lives, our very identities, like the kind of sex that we have, right? Who has power and who doesn't, the really intensely violent hierarchies that exist in a lot of our communities that are based on gender, especially based on gender. And
who has control of our own bodies? I mean, women don't have sovereignty over our own bodies. And oftentimes, our LGBTQ2 spirit relatives don't either, because sexual practices are outlawed, actually fucking outlawed by states.
Yeah, it's just disturbing. It's disturbing. I mean, the truth is, as you said, like there's this fiction of liberal democracy that somehow there's a separation between church and state. And, as a person growing up as a young, like indigenous kid, growing up in public schools in places like Arizona and Colorado, like I never saw a separation between church and state. Like in the United States, this is a Christian nation. And if you are not Christian, you are questioned. You are often interrogated in public institutions. If you don't swear on the Bible in a courtroom, right? Or if you don't pledge allegiance to God in a classroom, then, you're kind of a public enemy. And people are like, what the hell's wrong with you, you heathen, kind of thing. You're an outcast. And so, generally speaking, if we're going to have kind of like an anti-colonial or a decolonial perspective or a framework, the very basic premise of that is that you question the kind of the authoritarianism, something like Christianity, in a place like the United States, where the doctrine of discovery is like the literal foundation. It's the literal foundation of conquest. It's the literal foundation of colonization. And so you should question, at the very least, you should question it, and preferably you should challenge it. Everywhere that you see it rearing its ugly head, whether it's like in your community, whether it's in your bedroom, whether it's in your kitchen, right? Whether it's in like your classroom and things like that. Because I always experienced Christianity, and not people of faith necessarily. Like, I think we need people of faith for the upcoming struggle. Like, revolutionaries need to be people of faith. And your faith can come from anywhere, but you need to have faith, right? You need to have faith that things will change. You need to have faith in the will of people and the goodness of the world and the goodness of people. So I'm not challenging anyone that finds a really positive element of faith in Christianity. I'm talking about the institutionalization and basically the authoritarianism of Christianity as like a hegemonic force in our lives as Indigenous people, but pretty much everyone in the United States. Really, because this is pretty much like a mandatory Christian nation. And so you should push back against that if you have any kind of sense of kind of Indigenous identity. I think that is kind of paired with or embedded in a decolonial or an anti-colonial politics. And the fact that that doesn't always happen, I find very disturbing. Or like, it's usually Native men who are in leadership really being like apologetic for the church. This notion of a covenant, that's weird. See, like, even that language is kind of like creepy.
It's very creepy, and it almost like reminds me of those weird ass men's clubs.
Oh, those
at
secret
Ivy League
societies,
universities. Like, wasn't there one at Yale?
Skull
like
and Bones.
Skull and Bones, and that all of those presidents, the Bushes, belonged to. And, they were, at one point, didn't they, I'm digressing here, I'm going off.
The skull of Geronimo.
Didn't they once say they had the skull of Geronimo? Yeah. I mean, like, I actually absolutely agree with what Melanie said. Like, we need people of faith. And if your faith is found in, the teachings of Comrade Communist Brown Palestinian Jesus, then that's great. But the church is an institution, and the church is harmful. I was raised in a Catholic, in an area where Catholicism has deep, deep roots, but there's crazy ass churches all over the Dene lands as well, and there's like hardcore tent revivals and snakes and shit that happen, and yeah. Speaking in tongues, the hardcore evangelicals, and there's a lot of those on the Dene res. I see the tents when I'm up there, and they do weird stuff. I think that's mostly like circus and not real faith, but the men who benefit the most from these institutions. These heteropatriarchal institutions are the ones that need to snap and realize that, if you're really interested in the good of the people, in helping your people, church is not helping. The church has never helped. It's done nothing but harm, and harm in such a way that it's destroying future generations. And that's what pedophilia does. And it always attacks the marginalized communities. In New Mexico, it's not only the Native communities, but it's all people of color. And they're all the marginalized, the disenfranchised. They're the poor brown people that suffer the most because nobody will stand up for them. And that's why the servants of the Paraclete, which was the place in the Jemez that they sent the bad priests. And, they said it was rehab. It's not rehab. It's to give them time for things to settle down, and then they can move them to someplace else where they can prey on more young, poor, usually people of color. And that needs to change. And those reparations, billions. We're talking billions of dollars, because it's all over Turtle Island. Both so-called Canada and the so-called United States that land back and major money. And then while you're down there in the vaults trying to find the money to pay us back, give us all that other stuff back. Like, give us the feather headdress and Give us the things you stole. We want all that.
So I found a map, actually, of someone created a map of all the Catholic properties. And I'm just looking at like within like the so-called, the boundaries of the so-called United States. It's called goodarchive.curbed.com. But anyway, and it breaks it down between like cemeteries, chapels, convents, schools, hospitals, missions, monasteries, holy moly, centrist parishes, retreats, senior homes, universities, and miscellaneous. Wow, that's a lot of different categories of property. That's the most I've ever seen. But if you look at the map, it's like there's just like it just covers everything. Honestly, it just looks like it just kind of blankets North America. And so that's the extent. That's the extent of the wealth of the Catholic Church in Turtle Island alone. Imagine what that map looks like worldwide. And, you know, we always say, like, there's no shortage of resources. It's just like the ruling class hoards the resources while the millions of people perish. And, you know, I know that a lot of people, you know, think that churches, you know, out of the goodness of their hearts will go out and do charity work amongst Native people. Like they'll do feeds on the streets in a place like Gallup with unsheltered people. Or they'll go out and it's just charity. The notion of charity is heavily attached to Christianity, and to the institution of the church in general. But something, you know, we've critiqued very heavily as the Red Nation, especially in the context of reservation border towns where churches proliferate. Like churches love border towns because they can come in and collect souls and collect money to do charity work for Native people. And meanwhile, they don't change the structure of ongoing genocide at all because obviously they're like benefiting from it. But the thing is, like, the thing about churches doing like the good work of charity, right, is that charity is something that allows churches to continue to like justify their existence in these spaces. Because churches will be like, look, we need tax exempt status, you know, because we do this charitable work for these like poor Indians, you know, these poor Indians who don't have enough food, these poor Native children who don't have like a bed to sleep in, you know, all of these things. And so it's like a self-fulfilling type of thing where it really is an industry. It's an industry where churches are essentially acting as like I don't know what that was. I think that was my doorbell. I'm so sorry. I'm in a new house. I don't know what that was. But where churches are acting like pseudo-governmental entities providing social services and social goods for communities, primarily poor communities of color, indigenous communities, like you said, Elena. And so they get like tax breaks for doing that. But then they also, kind of like the Truth and Reconciliation process, get to like pat themselves on the back and be like, listen, look at the good work that we do in this community. We're not predatory. Like, this community needs us. These people need us. But of course, they don't talk much about the fact that every social good that they hand out, or every social service has like a Bible attached to it, or it has like some sort of missionizing that's attached to it, right? Where it's like,
or that they're operating on stolen land.
Or that they're operating on stolen land. Or like, why did they come to a border town like in the first place? It's because they're like, oh, this is a place where people are really poor and desperate. We're going to be able to collect souls and we're going to be able to make a lot of money doing it. This is the truth. And I'm sure not all churches operate this way, but fuck, man, you go to the eastern side of Navajo, you go to places like Farmington or Shiprock, you go to Gallup, there's a church on every corner. There are way more churches than there are community centers for our people, than there are homes for our people, or apartment complexes for our people. I'm sure folks have heard, like in movement spaces, it's like solidarity, not charity. Like mutual aid typically kind of operates on this notion of solidarity, not charity, because we're not interested in being charitable, because that's really just about like propagating kind of like this pseudo-governmental kind of aspect of both large nonprofits or foundations, corporate foundations, but also churches. They would fall into that category. But part of the other thing that we would have to actually be doing more actively, by we, I mean like grassroots people, folks who are really engaged at the community level, is we actually need to be providing the social goods and the social services that the church is providing. The church out-resource, I mean, like the Catholic Church is like one of the most powerful institutions in the world. Of course, like they're going to out-resource us at every turn. But in our communities, we can provide some of those social goods and social services, you know, and so can our tribal governments, frankly. And so that we can actually like create a relationship with our people that the church doesn't get to step in and be like, look, we're providing these essential services for Native people because their own nations, their own governments can't do this for them, which then again is like how they justify they're preying on our people in this way and justify this like just kind of like their never-ending presence in everything. Because churches will fund candidates for tribal government seats. They will fund delegations to Israel, you know, crossing BDS picket lines. Like churches, like they do with the Republican Party and any other aspect of American politics, churches influence like the political futures and trajectories of indigenous nations as much as they do other elements of the American political system. Right? Because they have money and power.
They have money and power, and if you think that there's any law that's restricting like the church, I don't know about the other churches, but I do know the Catholic Church, they got around the idea of not-for-profits having to legally stay out of politics by creating another arm of the Catholic Church called Opus Dei, which is one of the most powerful and well-funded political action committees in the world. And yes, they do interfere in elections, national, local, tribal, in order to advance the candidates that they want to see, i.e. tribal politics, in order to make things easier for the Catholic Church. And really, like, you know, when you think about charity, if it was really a charitable endeavor, you would go into a community and you would say, what do you need? And how can I help you get it? You would not, you know, if you really wanted to help people in indigenous communities, build a sweat lodge. Teach them or not teach them because the church would have no way of doing that, but encourage them to learn traditional ways, encourage the language. Everything that the Catholic Church does in with the word charity, it all comes at a cost. Nothing's free. Your cost is your soul and losing your connection to your own people. And that's what I think our tribal leaders don't understand is you know, we've literally sold our souls to the Catholic Church in order to have, we're actually giving them free access to our children.
But it's true. No, it's true.
Yeah. I mean, not only, but the pedophiles are one thing, you know, but also they have summer camps, and they are indoctrinating our children.
I'm telling you, that word indoctrination, right, which I so heavily associate with the church. I mean, that's like, that word is like paired with, I'm just going to use the term again, authoritarianism. Like, if we're trying to decolonize, like, we actually have to be thinking critically about how we actually decolonize, you know, from the indoctrination in the Holy Church of the church, you know, that we've all basically been fed since we were born. Since we were born, and it affects every aspect of our lives. And I remember when my kids were born, and you know, I come from a family that's heavily Catholic, except for thankfully my father. And everyone wanted to know when I was going to baptize my children. And I said my children are not being baptized in the Catholic Church because they were not born with sin. And people looked at me like, that's weird. Like, why would you not baptize your children? Because they weren't fucking born sinners. You know, they were born pure and innocent and, you know, just little indigenous babies who were not going to be
forced into a church, and we did things the native way. And even in, in this contemporary time where more people are turning away from the church and back to native spirituality and native life ways, that was a pretty big deal. And I want us to be at the point where that is not an issue, that the church is not so heavily involved in our day-to-day lives that people even question that. Like, that to me would be a little bit more freedom.
Yeah, that's true. Because you're right. Like, the church really is completely like enmeshed in our everyday lives, whether we're Christian or not. And I don't know. Yeah, if our aspiration is like liberation and freedom for Indigenous people, we got to tackle this one. And I know it's like I know it makes people very uncomfortable to tackle this one. But that's just the truth, right? Even whilst I have, like I said, I believe that there is a indispensable role for people of faith, of any faith, in the revolutionary struggle to come. And I respect, people's faith and the way that they practice their own spirituality. And
people of faith are not predatory.
I don't appreciate the people who are predatory with religion, not with faith, but with religion. I've been super judgmental. Oh my God. I have relatives. I've encountered hundreds, maybe thousands of people throughout my life, including many Native people. There are so-called traditionalists who are incredibly judgmental and, I don't know, like predatory. Even with they kind of turn that into a religion, which I also find really offensive. But it's like, could you not push your shit on me? Like, I don't push my shit on you. Like, it's that kind of stuff. It's like the missionary kind of, the missionizing stuff, the proselytization. That shit really bothers me. And it bothered me from the time I was a kid. I was like, do not tell me what to do. Do not tell me what to think. Like, I will make those decisions for myself. Stop trying to indoctrinate me. Like, I'm a free-ass Indian. I will think about this the way that I want to, and I will make my own goddamn decisions. And 40 years later, as a grown-ass woman, I am still that way. But I really, like, a lot of what I've encountered in terms of, like, Christianity, especially, like, fundamentalist Christianity, has just been, like, in your face, like, telling you you're a piece of shit if you don't believe this way. Just trying to shove it down your throat. And if it's not being shoved down your throat, you're like being manipulated in small ways into like participating in it. And even from the time I was a kid, I give this to my parents for teaching me this know-how, but just like smelling bullshit from a mile away and just being like, no, I will not drink your Kool-Aid.
Yep. Exactly. Yep. No, it's true. It's absolutely true. And I absolutely like agree. I mean, I was 12 years old in Mexico, and I was raised a Catholic. My father stood aside, let my mother take us to church, get us baptized, and First Holy Communion and all that. I have the pictures to prove it. I didn't burn up, which really surprised me. But in that little white dress in church, eating the blood of white Jesus. But I was in Mexico and at a church in Tasco outside of Mexico City. And it's this gorgeous church in Tasco. And you walk down this path and there are children and older people, people with physical challenges on makeshift crutches, people who look like they're starving, who have, clear facial deformities that they just looked like no one cared about them and no one paid attention to them. And they're making these little pinch pots and selling them for, a peso or 5 pesos. And I was 12 years old, walked into the church, and the walls of the church are gold. And there's jewels and there's jeweled chalices, and everything is gold and silver and bejeweled. And I remember walking out of that church along that line of these children and these older people. And we got out, and I asked my mother, I said, why are there, back then you said beggars. Why are there beggars when the church is full of gold? And my mother said, that's just the way the church works. And, ooh, yeah. So we get home after we spent months down in the Southlands, and when we came back to New Mexico, and my mother tried to take us to church, I refused, and she wanted to know why, and I said I refuse to be part of an institution that will allow their buildings to be paved in gold while children are starving in the front. And my father was not listening. He was not part of the conversation, but he was listening. And my mother started arguing with me. And my father just turned to her and said, she has made her argument. This was my father because he was an academic. It is a reasonable argument, and she does not have to go to church anymore. It was the one time that my father actually stood up and overruled my mother on the matters of church. And so I didn't have to go to church anymore. And it was a pivotal point in my life because I think it was the first time I was allowed to challenge that authority. And it made me realize that not everything that I was being fed was correct, accurate, good, right, just, appropriate. And it's a, question everything, read the history, question, always question. Because this is not a good thing for our people. It is not a good thing for our communities. It's not a good thing for our children. It's not a good thing for our elders. And we have to find a way, of ridding ourselves of this parasite, this giant blood-sucking parasite.
Well, now that we've committed our blasphemy for the week, I don't even know if I'm using that word correctly. This is what I meant when I said we were going to have a slightly uninformed, and by we I mean me, a slightly uninformed, opinion dump about the Pope's apology, because I don't even understand Christian language. I've never read the Bible. I'm seriously the least expert on Christianity from an insider's perspective you could possibly find.
You pagan!
I really am. I really am pagan. I'm a heathen, proudly so. I grew up in a very, very non-Christian household. And never pursued it as an adult, even out of intellectual curiosity. It was just never my jam. So I hope I've provided. I feel like I've rambled a lot today. I'm also just very tired, just because I've been moving my life nonstop for months. But I hope I offered something useful. A useful perspective. I feel like you were much better, Elena, just because you just know more. I think you just know more about this than I do.
No, I think you provided a huge perspective on the history and the difference between decolonization and with still having the church. I mean, the church has to go for decolonization. That's what I'm getting from you. The church has to go, in order to truly decolonize, because it is an institution that stands in the way of true decolonization. And if that's what we're looking at, and land back, the church has to go. And that's what I was riffing on once you said that.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of Native people who are Christian and who attend those churches. And I'm not out here trying to I'm not trying to be the person that a lot of Christians have been to me, which is just being like, my faith, my religion is better than your religion kind of thing, like the conversion kind of bullshit or the missionizing. That's not what I'm trying to say about like indigenous spirituality, like it's better. I'm just saying churches should be regulated. Churches should pay taxes to indigenous nations. They should not be allowed to participate or influence political decisions that indigenous nations are making. And they shouldn't just be, like you said, they shouldn't just have like free reign with our children. You know, it's really like the way that, we'll circle back to the actual topic of today's show, the Pope's apology, just being welcomed, like with open arms, carte blanche access to our people, like our destinies, our future, like our souls. Like enough with that. Like, let's at least pare that down a little bit, okay? Because we don't really give anyone else, we don't give any other entity this kind of power over us. That's really what it's about. It's like, what? Stop giving the church so much goddamn power over us. Like, why is that still happening? And like, you know, just put some like limits on that, for example. That's kind of all I'm asking. Or like, let's build really robust, beautiful grassroots organizations that are premised on indigenous values that can do the work, that can replace charity, right? So let's do that too at the same time, that we're like defending ourselves and protecting ourselves from the predations of the church and like challenging the power that it continues to hold over us. Like, that's all I'm saying. That doesn't need to be like a totalizing or like a, you know, a crazy project that stigmatizes Christianity in our communities. I'm actually not interested in that at all. It's just like, do something.
and I, you know, and along with that, yeah, I don't want to stigmatize or criticize or judge, because I was judged a lot. So y'all can do whatever you want. You want to, you know, follow the teachings of the Catholic Church, that's great. They just need to give us land back and money back, big money, and release everything that's in the Vatican vaults. Give it back to us. Those are my conditions.
Yeah, and I think those are reasonable conditions. And also like heteropatriarchy and like the justifications for men, like just men, just like using the church to just stay in power and to also have power over us, like, also, that needs, knock that shit off. Like, enough of that, too. Another, like, read the room kind of situation.
Well, and it also has contributed to extreme sex negativity in Western cultures that is so fucking devastating and harmful to all people. Whether you choose heterosexuality, you know, to define your relationships, or whether you're non-binary or LGBTQ, or pan, poly, whatever, sex negativity as established by the Catholic Church with these stupid fucking rules that they have has just been devastating. So let's cut that shit out too.
Basically what we're saying is like real justice, which requires real material reparations in the form of land and money and resources, and just freedom. Can we just have some goddamn freedom from like the domination of the church and the domination of heteropatriarchy in our lives? We just want to be free. We just want we want some justice, and we want some goddamn freedom. Because aren't those two essential aspects of liberation in general?
Yes.
So that's all we're saying here on Red Power Hour in a very wayward fashion.
And I didn't once say burn it down.
Well, you just did. So I'm really glad.
Okay, and burn it down. Burn it all down.
I'm very glad that made it into the episode. We're at 1 hour and 10 minutes. We riffed for the whole length of this episode, Elena. I'm proud of us. I was going to say, no, we can stop here. There's some other news, but we can sprinkle it in to future episodes. I'm excited to watch Pray and to be able to do some of that stuff. instead of watching. Actually, I think the video of the whole event surrounding the Pope's apology is probably the same length as this movie, the Predator movie. I would much rather spend an hour and a half of my time watching this movie than watching like an actual thing that happened.
And think about this. If the Predator was actually at the Pope's visit, then we wouldn't even be having this conversation because he would be gone.
Wow, if the Predator were real, well, actually, a lot of people would be gone. Well, okay, whatever. I don't know what's going to happen, but I have a strong feeling that either the Predator is going to like join forces with the indigenous people to take out some settlers, or like, I don't know, like, you know, that would be an incredible outcome, or like a conclusion to this movie, or the indigenous woman protagonist is going to defeat the Predator, which is also pretty fucking cool. But it's a movie about a predator, about predators, and we're just talking, the Catholic Church is a predator, right? And so they're related. They
are related. Take our word for it. Next time, we're going to tell you how.
In approximately an hour and 15 minutes. But
that's right.
I believe we're also going to record a bonus episode soon, deconstructing, and probably mostly just shit talking, Dark Winds, the Tony Hillerman TV. It's not a remake. Interpretation?
It is. It's been remade. I mean, this is a remake. It was a movie with Lou Diamond Phillips.
Didn't Robert Redford produce like some of those other like past Tony Hillerman things from like the 90s and the early 2000s?
They were just fabulous. This one, this is a different version of it, but we'll see.
All right. Well, I actually haven't watched it yet just because I've been too busy, but be on the lookout. If you're interested in joining our Patreon, please consider that. Go to patreon.com and look up Red Media. If you join, you can join for as little as $1 a month. Then you can get access to our bonus feed where we do things like talk shit about Dark Winds. We talked shit about 1883 before. Like, you know, this is just kind of partly what we do in addition to providing, you know, opinions about current events in the world. But thank you again for joining us, everyone. Happy Pueblo Revolt Day.